I thought I'd do a quick video just opening up my 6th edition Pendragon book. I was going to take a few moments to kind of show off some other things that I have and have had for a long time. I'm also going to talk a little bit about my Pendragon Journey. So I've been interested in Pendragon a long time. I didn't play it until very recently, or run it rather. So my first experience was running it. I bought this, which is a 3rd edition book. I think in 2000 is when I picked this up. I was really familiar with Chaosium from Call of Cthulhu. I played a bunch of that, and I was starting to get into that more. Wasn't running it, but playing it. I always loved King Arthur stories. I think my youngest experience with that was the 80s with Excalibur the movie. And then I got into a few of the books, so I couldn't really tell you what those were anymore. It's been a minute. Yeah, the 3rd edition book, I mean, this is how RPG books generally look back then. Very little colors, just black and white. Occasionally they had some really cool maps, though. Unfortunately, this receipt is faded, so I can't tell. Oh, $29.30 is what I paid for this back in the day. I'll show you, I think there's one other map in here. Where is it? Just there we go. Here's another map that unfolds. You can see that side there. Okay, so not only did I get this book in 2000, but I read through it with the intent of running it. And I think I just couldn't figure out how to combine the elements in this game with what I saw at the time as like a Pendragon theatrical game. It really seemed to be really crunchy. I found the traits to be a little confusing. The passions a bit confusing. The combat a little bit more realistic and gritty than at the time I wanted. I was big into, like, you know, I would have been younger, so I was big into anime and all sorts of things like that back then, where it tended to be a bit more over the top. So the idea of like falling off your horse and dying wasn't as interesting to me as it is now. Not that that's what you do in Pendragon, but we do joke that you eat shit and fall off your horse all the time. Yeah, so that's the oldest edition. A few years ago, I was watching a lot of actual plays of different games, and only a couple of them really interested me. I ended up being turned on to Eric Vulgaris's Great Pendragon campaign, and I started watching that from the beginning, even though that was like a few years after they started. I think they were in Boy King or just moving into Conquest when I started watching their videos, and I blew through like 30 years of their game, because this is a game, a generational based game where you're supposed to play through, or can play through, up to 60, I think, 60 or 80 years of play in the Great Pendragon campaign. And they have like those concepts and model still exist in the core rulebook of 6th edition today, but they aren't as prominent. Like the game does assume short-term campaigns. I think that's the model with most TTRPGs I see now. Even a lot of the systems don't really support the concept of a really long-term campaign. If you were to try to take a lot of the new systems that are out there and run them through something long-term, you'd feel like you hit the wall, or the ceiling rather, real quick, within 3 to 6 months. What I do like about some of the older games like Pendragon, especially Pendragon, is it's designed to support that. So a few years back, watching Eric's stream, it clicked. This is how you run a Pendragon game. At least this is how I run a Pendragon game. I'd still say that I have quite a few differences from how Eric does it, but his general concept of like workshopping with the players versus running through something linear and kind of doing those high level overview beats, that kind of opened my eyes to that. How you could simply roll a few dice and kind of narrate the outcome of what happened to this character in autumn this year. That opened it up a bit to me around, you know, how you move through a Pendragon progression and how exciting something like the Great Pendragon game could be. Because I think when I first originally reviewed that, it seemed to be more like a long-term series of GM notes, and I'm not sure that was enough for me at the time. I'm not sure my knowledge of, or my confidence, I guess, with that was enough to be able to be successful. So I wasn't confident enough to follow through with that. But after seeing Eric's stream, that changed. So I started with what was supposed to be kind of a short-term prologue, just to figure out how to stream. I wanted to stream it too, first time streaming. So we did a little 5-year prologue starting with the Age of Uther, where Uther is just coming into Rise, literally just becomes king the first year you play. That really kind of gave me some confidence with the game. And then we continued that game in Salisbury on, and we're playing it through to this day. We're still in the Age of Anarchy, so after the death of King Uther, but before the death of the Boy King. Or before the coming of the Boy King. So that's really taken off for me, and I've really enjoyed that. So much so that I've expanded to 2 other ongoing campaigns in that same setting, set in different areas of Britain, kind of looking at the other parts of Britain and how they're affected by some of the same global plot while having their own unique identities. But as we move towards Boy King, which is kind of the default position for 6th edition, I'm starting to prime for a conversion over to 6th edition. We're currently using version 5.2 and everything that has to offer. So I suspect by early next year, 2025, we'll be in 6th edition. Last year when this came out, I picked up the starter set, which is pretty cool. I'll do a quick look at this. I won't go through the details, but it came with a series of loose leaf pieces of paper here. Some of these are appendices. So appendices on battle. It also has the characters you can play through for the little short-term campaign that they have, including the sword tournament. And then it has a what is this for page, and then 3 separate books. So book 1 is The Adventure of the Sword in Stone. Book 2 is The Fabled Realm. And all these have a cool map of Britain behind. You can put them together to make one map. And book 3 is the Sword Campaign. Alright, so now with the unboxing of the core rule book. Here it is first off. My first worry was receiving this in the mail, that it wouldn't be in good shape. So I'm glad it was. Just making sure to get the shrink wrap around the corners so that I don't bend corners on books. It's like one of my big peeves when books have bent corners, especially hardcover books. It's like kind of unavoidable with soft covers. Okay, what kind of knight will you become? Now, I did receive the PDF like a week ago, and I've started to work through creating a character on it so that I can get up to speed. I do find this book to be one of the higher end versions of what I've seen from Chaosium, as far as art, as far as production. Lots of beautiful colored setups in here, lots of art. Ooh, look at that. A lovely little placekeeper. It's wonderful. So, talking about Pendragon a little bit, if you were to look at the system overall, the key components are still there. They've always been there through every edition. You can kind of run any campaign published previously, any idea published previously with very little modification. You can run it in any setting. That being said, the 6th edition definitely has the most changes. And I'd say most of the changes are for the better from what I've seen. But to speak about Pendragon in general, if I were to describe it for a new player and where I find it really interesting and different than any other game I've played, it comes down to the traits and passions. So yes, you have stats and you have skills, and those matter and they're super interesting. The way they do them, it's very much geared towards, you aren't just some adventurer in the setting, you are a noble knight who's been trained since your childhood to become one. They do support like a more broad support, I'd say, for women knights in this one, which is really good. I think they'll also support probably the lady of the court scenario still, if you wanted to do that sort of thing. I'm not sure if it's in this book, but I guarantee it'll be here. But if I was to describe why someone should try Pendragon versus another game, I think the traits and passions really do it for me. So passions really are a mechanical way in the game of showing you just how much that person cares about different aspects of their life, whether it be their love to their family, their devotion to their lord or king, their hate for different various peoples of the realm, like maybe the Saxon invaders, the most obvious one, and more interesting, and I guess a more love for an individual. And you see those conflicts play out in Arthuriana. I mean, Lancelot being the most obvious one. What's the constraint when you look at his devotion to his king and his best friend versus the love of his life, or his biggest passion for Guinevere? And we all know how that generally plays out. Not the best. Fought it for years though, right? So the game does that wonderfully, including being able to call on your passion to receive a temporary bonus, and then also the concept of being melancholic or going into madness if you should fail that roll. It kind of represents, and the bigger the passion, sort of the harder the fall. The greater the madness, the greater the melancholy. The traits for me are wonderful. They're a series of virtues and vices. You might start out with one type of character concept in mind, and due to the way the virtues and vices play out, end up with someone entirely different, which fits really well because you're not just playing through a year. Like a lot of sort of D&D campaigns, it might be like 1 or 2 years of the character's life. You're playing through till someone ages and dies, if they make it that long. So yeah, you should change. Like who you were at 21 isn't going to be who you are at 45. And I think this game reflects that wonderfully. It also allows for, for people that are super into Crusader Kings or anything like that, if you're less of the, I don't want to do the dramatics, but you love like the management of a manor and politics and intrigue and backstabbing, I'd say there's no greater game than this that covers that. That being said, it does, especially Boy King 4 being the emphasis, it wants you to be honorable knights, not necessarily Machiavellian knights. But there's plenty of room to play with that if you want. Okay, a quick overview of the book. Let's see what the sections are. So, welcome to Camelot. The game system itself. Creating your player knight. I did look through some of that, so if you're interested in getting this edition but you've played prior, I noticed that it supports both kind of like more of a random creation or a points-based distribution creation, which I think is cool. Both are very interesting. I think random traits is more interesting than the getting your religious traits at a certain level, but that's just me. So it goes through traits and passions, skills, aspirations, combat, which looks to have changed quite a bit. It's gotten it supports a little bit more granularity, I think, so you can have a little bit more in-depth combat. Weapons, they seem to be more in detail and kind of spread out through the different eras of play. Armor, horses. Armor also depends on the eras of play. It's almost like one of the creative inspirations for this is the Arthuriana that exists. So even though it's set in like 5th and 6th century Britain, the armor and the weapons are more like medieval times. It's got horse systems, including training horses, breeding. Super interesting. Injury and health, wealth, treasure, and trade. Solo scenes, which are remember when I described doing some roles and figuring out what happened to your character in autumn. That's kind of those rules. The winter phase. So that is kind of your, for those that do like the idea of having a manor, upgrading it, finding out what's going on. The medieval Stardew Valley of TTRPGs, the winter phase does that nicely. In previous editions, it comes off a little bit more. We joke that it comes off like accounting, but that being said, it's pretty fun to play through. It has a conversion to 6th edition, which is super good because, look, a lot of Pendragon players are running through a great Pendragon campaign, which is multiple year commitment, and if you want them to convert, you need to give them some incentivizations. I think looking through it, a lot of the conversions make complete sense. And then they have some pre-gen characters, which is fantastic because I think you could they have the Adventurous Knight, Champion Knight, the Courtier Knight, the Hardy Knight, the Hunter Knight, the Religious Knight. You could probably play, say, 3 Hunter Knights, and 5 years into the game, they'd be drastically different. You could have one start Christian, 2 pagan, I don't know, and randomly roll your traits in. Before you know it, they'd be like completely different characters. So I showed this page briefly, but these are the eras you can play through. So you can see you can go from 415 to 566 if you actually wanted to. The default for this game is the Boy King era, which is way down here. It's like the 8th generation you can play through. Most games before that started somewhere around Boy King to Uther period, somewhere in there. It just makes the best sense because you get to see kind of the origin of things. Anything behind that or further back is kind of more like the origin of the knight and the origin of I guess the origin of Uther and Arthur's bloodline. Is there anything? One thing I really like in this edition is that some of your starting skills are not just a flat number, but they're based on what your stats or attributes are. So dex might mean a better horsemanship, a strength might mean a better brawl just by default, which is just makes good sense to me, and also kind of ties some importance into what your starting attributes are. Yeah, I think that's all I care to say about this time. I'll be converting my game in the next year to this, but I'm going to be playing around with this in the meantime. Thanks for watching. Yeah, take care.